Okay, over to you, Scott. I think you're chairing the session, aren't you?
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. So, welcome back, everyone, after a quick comfort break. This next hour is really focused on a selection of 4 presentations and talks from various of the challenge entrants, actually, as part of the first Cadenza Machine Learning Challenge. So, 4 talks in an hour, around about 15 minutes each, and hopefully we'll have time for questions after each of these talks. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Sevag Hanssian to give the first paper, which is entitled Better Music Demixing with the Slice Q Transform. Over to you, Sevag.
Awesome. Hello. Hi, everybody. You can hear me? Everything's good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Am I sharing my own slides, or is someone going through the slides? I could share.
My intuition is maybe you can share. Trevor, is that?
That's perfect. Okay.
Yeah, if you can. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. There it is. Beautiful. I hope we can all see it. Great.
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome. Oh, shit. My bad. Give me a second. Apologies, I don't normally use Microsoft Teams. Okay. We should be on track. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Sevag. I'm very happy to present my work here. It's called Better Music Demixing with the Slice Q Transform. It's an evolution of my first paper, my first research paper ever, which was music demixing with the Slice Q Transform. And it's what I submitted to the Cadenza challenge. So I'll begin with how I even got started in the subject of music demixing. So it was my first algorithm ever I looked at was HPSS, harmonic percussive source separation with median filtering by Derry Fitzgerald, 2010. I love this algorithm. It's so clean, so simple. The idea is you take your magnitude spectrogram where vertical lines, you can think of them as representing sort of percussive noise on the broadband spectrum, and horizontal lines are sort of strong pitches that are sustained in time. So that's more harmonic. And you apply median filters, you filter out the pixels in vertical and horizontal rectangles to preserve the harmonic and percussive components of sound. And if you look at different variations of this paper, you'll see that over time, people have been experimenting. You end up with using short windows for percussion and long windows for harmonic sound. And this is a well-known fact of the time frequency uncertainty principle was mentioned earlier today. The idea that in musical and auditory contexts, the longer time window you take to get more and more frequency detail, you lose the temporal detail by nature of taking a long window. And vice versa, if you take a very short window, you don't see enough periodicity and you don't capture all the frequencies of a harmonic instrument. Now, for music and the human auditory system, speech in a lot of different contexts, you should have a frequency resolution that increases from high to low frequencies. So at the low frequencies, you want a high frequency resolution. You have the harmonic basis of a song, you have the bass instrument, the human speech is down at the low frequency range. Meanwhile, if we're talking high frequencies like 10,000, 16,000, 20,000 hertz, you're not getting important harmonic information there. Those are more important for your transients, other sort of percussive temporal aspects. And as we go through, as we follow the low window, high window, small window, big window idea, you end up with a transform like the CQT, the constant Q transform, first created by Dr. Judith Brown, which uses the long windows in low frequencies, short windows in high frequencies, sort of along the 12-tone Western pitch scale. So the CQT in the beginning, the original version, did not have an inverse transform. Over time, there was a Clapuri paper which added approximate inverse for the CQT. But eventually, we ended up with a proper invertible slice Q transform, sort of based on frame theory, like deep mathematics that I'm not very good at. But it's the real-time variant of the non-stationary Gabor transform. But in short, in summary, it is a STFT-like transform. It's a little bit like a short time Fourier transform. It is a spectral transform. It has a perfect inverse, very important. And it has time varying windows such that you can construct any arbitrary spectral analysis. You could do a regular linear short time Fourier transform. You could use it to implement a constant Q transform, and really anything you want. And what I ended up doing, I did a parameter search of which transform had the most uh, the simple system I used was discarding the phase. I don't pay attention to phase, work on the magnitude spectrogram, which is pretty common. And I did a parameter search of which transform keeps the most energy in its magnitude, performs the best when we discard its phase. I ended up with the Bark scale, a well-known auditory scale. And I muddled through trying to create some neural network architecture that could produce some kind of output. And I ended up getting a 3.6 dB signal to distortion ratio, which was a little bit worse than Open Unmix, the model I was basing my work on. So when I got the email about Cadenza challenge, I was definitely interested in participating. I thought maybe the Bark scale has some magic emergent properties that would make it more pleasant to human listeners. So, I didn't discount my model just because my signal to distortion ratio was low. I focused only on the VDBO demixing problem, not the HAQI and everything. Although I found all those things fascinating, I just, with the work full time and everything, I had to focus only on what I know. I ended up making a bunch of changes, a bunch of evolutions to my model, XUMX slice Q. I'll describe just a few of them. One thing that the slice QT has this difficult little aspect. Yes, it is a perfectly invertible transform, but you're given the spectral coefficients inside windows that are padded. It's called the sliced QT. You're given spectral coefficients inside slices. These adjacent slices have zero padding on the left and right. And in the paper, in the reference code, they show you that you must overlap add these slices, you see all these black gaps, to create an actual spectrogram that goes forward in time. But there is no inverse operation for this. So this form is invertible, but this real spectrogram is actually not. I had difficulty with this the first time, but I'll say that what I did this time is I incorporated that signal processing knowledge, the window and the hop size of the slice Q transform, inside the convolutional layers of my neural network, which seemed to work out much better. And another thing I'll mention, which pat myself on the back for this one, I'm more of a programmer than I am an academic for sure. But for once, I had a hunch based on a mathematical formula that worked out in the code. And it's that a simplifying assumption of these VDBO models is the mix is a linear sum of the four components. So your X mix is the sum of vocals, drums, bass, and other. And the spectrogram and the magnitude spectrogram is also a linear operation. So again, the exact same sum applies. And now what I do in XUMX slice Q, just like Open Unmix, I'm estimating a mask by which to multiply the mixed spectrogram. So we end up with this second line. You have your, we replace the vocals with the mask of the vocals times the mix, et cetera, et cetera. What you end up with is the fact that all of your masks need to sum to exactly 1. So I added an extra loss term. I call it the mask sum loss, which is exactly that. I make a tensor of all ones compared to the sum of masks. And that got my signal to distortion ratio significantly higher. So this would be generalizable to any model that's using masking of the spectrogram, not just slice Q transform. So on to the results. Here's the block diagram of the whole thing. It's a ragged time frequency transform, so you kind of have like a bunch of spectrograms stacked on top of each other. And the lower frequencies have more time coefficients. Fewer time. You have a bigger frequency resolution. And the higher frequencies have more time resolution. And I pass it through this entire network, but just to summarize the results, the SDR score went up to 4.4 from 3.6. Still not as good as Open Unmix, which is something like 5.3, but I'm still happy for that improvement. The Hacky score, compared to the baseline one, which I believe is DMUX, 0.09 compared to 0.255. This I'm not surprised, since I'm worse than OpenUnmix, and I know that OpenUnmix is significantly worse than Demux. Worse is subjective, but when it comes to signal to distortion ratio, for sure. So I'm not surprised at 0.2. I was pleasantly surprised, I would say, at the BAQ score. That it seemed listeners did like hearing my model. If I had to guess, it's that because the separation isn't too strong, I'm also not introducing too many unpleasant artifacts. So it might just sound good. The weights are pretty small. I do like to focus on speed and efficiency. And there is also a real-time variant as part of the project, which I did not submit to the Cadenza challenge. And that's about it for XUMX Slice Q, the actual model. But like while I was working on this challenge, I did notice a trend that reminded me of the MDX 21, the Music Demixing Challenge 21. There was a Sound Demixing Challenge 23. It seems like OpenUnmix and Demux are these two common academic baselines, and they're both great models. And I did start on a new project related to this VDBO separation. Now, from the Cadenza challenge, we know that the aim of these systems is to improve the listening experience for those with different hearing. But I'll tell you off the bat, just from like years of working on these models, they're not very accessible. Like right now, if you try to run OpenUnmix the way it's published, not to disparage the authors, they've done great work, but you might have a crash if you don't have enough RAM. Like 64 gigabytes, that's a lot of memory. And like, they'll tell you, oh, you should modify this command line argument, this and that. Well, I don't think that's very accessible. So to that end, I have been trying to work on this website. It's called freemusicdemixer.com. I take these models, OpenUnmix and Demux, sort of adapted to run in the web using WebAssembly under 4 gigabytes of memory. So that's something pretty cool. I really wanted to show that off today, share it with people. But today you just load up this website, it runs on your machine, and it does your VDBO separation for you. You don't need to mess around with Python or anything. And yeah, I think that's the end of my talk. Thanks, everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sevag. Really interesting summary of this Slice Q transform, quite intuitive for someone like me who is a little less well versed in the technicalities. I found it really engaging. We have around about 3 minutes, I think, for any questions in the group. I'd like to open it out to the workshop in the chat or raise your hand. I can maybe start with a question. Or Trevor, did you have something? Or
yeah, so I was interested in your talking about the change in the frequency resolution, and you in your examples you went up to 16,000 hertz. I don't remember the last time I heard 16,000 hertz at my age, so I wonder if there's also an opportunity in thinking about what's a realistic upper limit for some of these people who have hearing loss, and would that help your system at all to sort of stop at 10, 12 kilohertz, which is realistically probably the upper end of what I hear most of the time.
Yeah, that's a great point. So OpenUnmix itself, the model that I'm working on, in its paper, it claims to have an upper limit of 16,000 hertz, actually discards frequency bins above 16,000. But when it comes to the code, I'm running this thing, I'm pulling my hair out because it actually doesn't. It actually does account for every frequency, even above 16,000 hertz. So so over there, I was like, I'm going to be more faithful to the implementation rather than the idea. I think that also when I have tried removing those upper frequency bins, it affects the SDR score, the BSS metrics, which that could be a point that says this artificial metric has no real bearing on, since it's evaluating frequencies that we don't hear, it's maybe I'm pandering to the metric rather than the actual auditory aspects. But yeah, I haven't gone too far in pruning or removing those frequency bins.